Hi there, Russell Sturgis here again with my next instalment in my blog series. Today I'm here at Double Bay again, which I did one of my blogs a couple of months ago here, and it's just such a beautiful day here today, as you can see, and with all the beautiful homes and the water behind me, it's a lovely environment. You'll hear some noises around me because I'm next to a little beach, so there'll be people on the beach, so I hope that they're not too disruptive to what we're going to be talking about today. I want to do a series of blogs over the next 3 blog sessions on relationship and awareness in relationship, and in particular I'm wanting to focus on 3 areas. The first one is the falling in love component of relationship. The second one is looking at the maintenance of relationship, and the third one is about separation when relationships come to an end. And in particular, obviously, I'm wanting to focus on how all of those things can be engaged in awareness. And so today I'm wanting to talk to you about awareness in the beginning of a relationship, in coming together. Obviously, the thing that most people experience is this thing of falling in love. They meet somebody, and my dad had a great word. He talked about being Twitter-pated, and it was this whole idea that there was this amorous experience of having met somebody and finding them attractive and falling in love with them, and having this whole experience of wanting to be with somebody and being consumed by them. And of course we see lots of movies that capture these moments and are able to really beautifully get this whole idea of falling in love. And of course we know that for the majority of people that's not sustainable. For the majority of people that lasts for a time, and then the reality of personalities and circumstances kick in, and then all of a sudden people are falling out of love. There are other reasons why people go into a relationship which are motivated by things like security, whether it be financial or just purely domestic security, having a roof over their head. Some people are lonely and are wanting companionship, so they go into a relationship for the sake of companionship. We have a generation of men, and I'm talking now about my father's era, who ultimately didn't have to look after themselves in terms of their domestic situation, and have found themselves either through death or through divorce on their own, and desperate to have somebody come and look after them because they don't have that ability they haven't developed the skills or the abilities to do those things. Of course, we've come from a model from my parents' generation where basically it was a male-dominated model as it related to relationship, and so, you know, women had a role, men had a role, they got married, they fulfilled their role, and ultimately they lived happily ever after. Of course, that's not the truth, because in order for happiness to exist in that sort of model, it means that somebody ultimately is having to give something up in order to placate the needs of the other person, and so not uncommonly we would see women forfeiting what it is that they've wanted to do in the world in order to meet the demands of what their husbands are trying to achieve. I can remember my own mum talking about wanting to go and study massage back in the 70s, which meant that she had to travel 80 kilometres to go and learn massage. And I can remember her telling me the story of stating or letting Lindsay, my dad, know that she was keen to do this, and was asking him permission, basically, that it was okay. And he said, yes, you can go and do that. And of course my mother's jaw dropped. She just couldn't believe it. And of course within the next breath he said, but don't bother coming back. And so it was sort of like, it was an expectation that she was there to look after the boys, to run the house, and I can remember on several occasions her having done all of the housework and having a break, and Dad just worked down the road and he'd pull in the driveway and she'd hop up and busy herself, because this was part of the roles that were expected. Of course now things have moved on now, and women have become much more self-empowered in terms of being able to create realities for themselves. Now, I think our culture is still catching up with that, in terms of the fact that what we have is a whole lot of women who have found this capacity to be self-determined, self-empowered, but financially haven't caught up with the mentality for that independence. And so now we're facing a situation where we have a whole lot of 40 and 50 somethings and 60 somethings to some extent who are finding themselves out on their own without sufficient to back them up in order to be able to live independently, and so they're struggling to survive on their own. The consequence of that is that many of them are finding themselves going into relationships with people in order to have security and stability. Any time where there's a trade-off, the relationship ultimately becomes an I trade you relationship. In other words, there's the promise that if you're able to supply security, for example, then I'll supply homemaking, and we might even tie into that deal sexual favours. And so what ends up happening is we have this sort of trade agreement going between the man and the woman, where one's sort of offering to provide a certain service, if you want to call it, and the other one's providing something in return. The problem with that is that there's times where that isn't always sustainable and the trade agreement breaks down. And of course, once the trade agreement breaks down, then the relationship breaks down. So we've got all sorts of models that are taking place. So then what does a conscious engagement in relationship look like, and what does an aware relationship look like? So in the blog I talk about a particular quote that proposes the idea that a healthy relationship is when two people come together basically and all of a sudden they look up and realizing that the person beside them isn't looking longingly into their eyes, but is looking in the same direction that you're looking, that they're looking forward in parallel. And I take this to mean the whole notion that two people in an aware relationship come together with a really clear sense of their purpose, and that they're committed and fully engaged in fulfilling their purpose each day. They wake up knowing what it is that they're about and the things that they're going to be doing each day. And so that they're not necessarily out there looking for a relationship. They're not looking for validation, because they're validated through their work and through the contribution that they make to the world through their purpose. They have a sense of self-acceptance because they know what they're able to do and what they've been able to achieve. So they're not looking for these things in somebody else. They've been able to find them within themselves, and generally in that place of purpose where they're coming from a place of stillness, they have abundance in their life. So they're not even looking for somebody to financially meet their needs. And so what we end up with is two people who basically are self-fulfilled, who look up and realizing that the person beside them isn't looking inward. In other words, they're not sort of dealing with their deep wounds and all of those things, but they're really clear in that they have clarity of mind, that they have this stillness, that they're joyful in their being, and they're committed each day to moving forward on their purpose. And it just happens that your purpose and their purpose are aligned, and you're walking this journey together, side by side. In terms of that place of clarity of purpose, that then requires the ability to overcome your story. And in fact, for most of us, the reason why we're in dysfunctional relationships is because of our story. It's a belief that we've developed through our formative years and which we've carried through into our productive years, where we have this sense of our deep wound and we're looking to have that wound healed by somebody outside of us. And of course, we go into relationships, and oftentimes that experience of falling in love is actually engaging relationship with somebody who's able to help maybe give some salve to that wound of ours, as opposed to having moved beyond the story into the place of purpose and into the place of stillness, where you're no longer dictated by any of those things, and engaging somebody who's also has awareness in terms of how they're moving forward. On my left hand, I talk about this, and I'm just going to put this right up close to the camera. My ring on my wedding ring finger has two symbols on it, which is the cross of St. James and a scallop shell. And they are symbols of the Camino de Santiago. And in 2011 I walked the Camino, and the reason that that ring is on that finger is that it's a symbol of the commitment that I made at the end of that walk about my purpose and what I was prepared to do in the world in terms of my role around that. And that ultimately that's what I was committed to first and foremost. What that means is that relationship is secondary to that. In other words, my commitment is commitment to the divine, my commitment to God, whatever you want to call that, in terms of how I turn up in my unique form of service. And of course, the Enhancers Awareness Program is exactly that. The person that I choose to be in relationship is somebody who has a similar purpose, who has a similar vision, and is committed to that. And they too would probably be, I would say, in exactly the same ilk, that ultimately it's the thing that they are first and foremost committed to is that, and then the relationship is secondary to that. The beauty about that is that we come together in unconditionality. Now, we obviously have layers of that we're working on, and old parts of our story that are knitted into the fabric of our psyche that we've still got to work on. But ultimately, we're really clear that the point at which we're feeling anything other than stillness, we're in our story, and and that it's not the other person. That anytime we project blame onto the others, it's actually about our stuff. And so what happens is that there's a huge shift in how we engage relationship. There's respect, there's awe, there's unconditionality, there's no judgment, etc., etc. So it becomes a relationship that is indeed very loving. And in that relationship, there is clarity of purpose. In that relationship, there is a commitment to well-being. In that relationship, there is joy and there's happiness in the way in which it's experienced. And ultimately, there's freedom. So in other words, you're not expected to turn up having to be a certain way other than being integrous and committed to the shared purpose. Anyway, so this is a whole different idea and a different way of approaching a relationship. And basically what it's asking, just recapping, is that we become aware of the story and the way in which the story has us move into trade agreements. And that when we move beyond the story to a place of where we're committed to stillness and where we're committed to being free of our story, where we've got clarity of purpose, we're really committed to that and engaged in that, then one day in that process of being in that, as I said, there's a point where we look up and somebody's looking outward in the same direction as us. That's the gift. That's the framework for being able to create an aware relationship. I'd love to hear from you if you have any thoughts about that. I hope you find it informative. Please go to our website, eapmentor.com, to find out more about how we help people find purpose, and also go to our Facebook, which is Enhancers Awareness Program, and have a look at the wonderful things that we post up each week about being able to maintain an aware consciousness. Thanks for listening, and I'll speak to you again in a couple of weeks. Bye.